In the cinema. I interlocked my fingers with the kid sitting beside me for a full minute. Turns out, he wasn't my kid. What's the most awkward situation you've ever been in with a stranger? I worked security at an aquatic theme park and was watching Jeopardy in the employee entrance. One of the veterinarians came through and watched it with me for a bit. He said he watches it religiously and he'd passed the test for the show and was hoping to get selected. He'd heard that they like to have a diverse group of contestants, and they hadn't had a black guy for a while, so he liked his chances. A few days later, there are 2 black contestants, so when I see him leaving the next time I say, "Hey, did you catch Jeopardy last week?" "No, why?" He responds. "There were 2 black guys on it," I explain. He just stares at me blankly for a few seconds, and walks off. That's when I realized it was a different gentleman than I had the previous conversation with. Got on an elevator with a woman and she had these really nice boots, so I complimented them by saying, "Nice boots." She cups her breasts and says, "Well, you're not shy, thank you, they're real." And then immediately realized I said boots. She thought I said, "Nice boobs." Longest elevator ride ever. To this day whenever I say boots in any context I do so with a very hard deliberate T. The most awkward moment of my life thus far was with a stranger. I was in Quebec Airport going through customs with my family. Because of some recent changes to their system they didn't have everyone in a line, but instead in a large pen where they would release 50 people at a time. Chaos. When my family is at the front, they release us and everyone is running forward in a mass trying to get to the kiosks. Next to me is a tall Swedish man trying to get his family a kiosk. He is running forward and waving his arm behind him in a come-on motion, clearly frantic. Well, somehow the worlds aligned where his middle and pointed finger went perfectly into my 2 nose holes. Perfectly, as he then ripped his arm upwards to motion his family forward, my nose was also ripped forward, and I immediately began bleeding, everywhere. He looked at me in horror, my family looked at me in frustration as we needed to get to a kiosk. The customs agents looked at me in bewilderment. The language barriers made this situation all the more awkward. Woman at a gas station didn't know how to put air in her tires, so I helped her because I wanted to put air in my tires, and didn't want to wait all day to do it. She called her husband on speakerphone to let him know she found some nice man to help her air her tires. Then I hear him call her an idiot and say that I'm only helping her because I want to have sex with her, and where does she get off talking to other men? She stammered and tried to explain that nothing was going on between us. After she got off the phone she looked at me as if her husband just caught her having sex with me and got in her car and left. No thank you. No nothing. And for some reason I felt guilty for even helping her out. Jesus, I feel awkward just thinking about it. At the airport, I walk up as the elevator door is closing and there is a woman inside with a stroller. I slowed down because I wasn't in a hurry and would rather catch the next one. Then I saw a little girl about 3, playing in a flower pot thing nearby. I realized she was likely meant to be on the elevator with her mom, but the doors are closed by the time I put it together. I walk up to her and said, "Did your mommy get in the elevator?" She just shyly smiles. I sit down with her and decide to wait in place for a few minutes for the mom to realize. A minute or 2 later, a man walks up and says, "Excuse me, can I have child?" in a thick Russian accent. I was trying to decide what to ask to figure out if she was his kid, when the elevator door reopened and the woman came flying out yelling for the girl. She hops up happily and runs over to the mom. I stared at the guy with an accusing look, then he turned and got in the elevator too. I don't know what the heck was going on there. Was he with them? Did he think I was trying to take their kid? Was he a creeper following them? So awkward. I literally sat silent through the whole weird encounter. It was my first time voting in a presidential election in 2016, since I was becoming old enough to do so, and polling place was at a library. When I get to the front of the line and start filling out the required papers, I mention it's my first time and what to do next. After hearing this, the woman who was working there and helping me raised her voice and said, "Hey everyone, we've got a first-time voter here," and started clapping so they all would clap as well. Nobody clapped, and I was just standing there really embarrassed before quietly saying, "Can I just go vote now?" My wife and I went out for a drink one night. We walk into the bar, I see someone I know at the bar with their back turned, walk up behind them and tickle their sides. Turned out I didn't know this person, they just have me a weird look and walked away. Got their spot at the bar though. Hooked up with a guy in college and fell asleep in his dorm room. I woke up in the middle of the night needing to pee so badly, but unable to find any of my clothes right away. I ended up spending so long trying to find them in the dark that by the time I had enough to wear out in the hall to get to the bathroom, I didn't think I'd make it. He was still sleeping, so I grabbed a big reusable water bottle and squatted over it. It was blissful relief until I looked over and saw his roommate staring at me in horror. When I was a teenager, my friends and I would spend the weekends staying up late playing video games and eating junk food. I was also a cross-country runner, and on this particular night I was experiencing some extreme chafing from a long run earlier that day. While we were at the gas station getting Doritos and energy drinks, I announced to who I thought was my friend, "Man, my nipples really hurt." Upon realizing it was a complete stranger with whom I had just shared this intimate detail, I simply stared at him and said, "You're not my friend," and walked away. I didn't go back to that gas station for a long time. It was intensely awkward when I gave a hitchhiker a ride and he started talking graphically about his sexual interests and proclivities. I only gave him a ride because it was pouring rain and he looked like a college student from our university. When he started getting more and more personal, I couldn't wait for him to get out of the car at his destination, something he didn't want to do once we arrived. At an art studio in LA, my girlfriend was wearing a denim jacket as we looked at a piece together. Out of the corner of my eye I saw the jacket and I reach over to grab her butt. A sudden, "Oh!" comes from beside me and a woman 30 years older than me is standing there blushing. I tell her I thought she was someone else and run away to my girlfriend. A few minutes later the lady comes and finds us to talk about young love and how cute we are while making too much eye contact with me. That time I screamed at a woman over poo. My little village has a small annual dog show. We normally enter our little dog who is one friendliest dog, waggiest tail and dog the judge would like to take home in the past. This year she was unfortunately in season, so we didn't enter to prevent any fuss from the other dogs but took her along to watch. Halfway across the park she decided to poo and I suddenly realized I'd forgotten a bag. There were loads of other people with dogs around due to the show, so I wandered away a little to ask someone for a bag. I turned back into my horror. A lady was picking up my little dog's mess. Not wanting to feel like one of those a-holes that doesn't clean up, I ran towards her to advise her she didn't have to do that because I was going to get it. Instead, in a sort of panic, I waved my arms and barked, "No, that's my poo." Please note that I did not say, "That is my dog's poo." She physically jumped, then turned a deep red. She sort of mumbled an apology, dropped the poo and marched off with her dog. It was at that point that I looked to my left and saw my dog's poo sitting a few feet away from the lady's dog mess that she was attempting to pick up. I think about this at night sometimes. I was at a movie theater with my brother. We were watching Pacific Rim. During the action scenes he had to fart, so he waited until the music was at its loudest to be inconspicuous. The second he lifts his butt cheek and begins, the music stops and all everyone can hear in the movie theater is giant foghorn of a fart. Imagine the music in action scenes, how it builds and builds and builds, then has a moment of silence for a bit more drama. Then a short-sounding fart takes it over. The reactions from the people in the theater were laughter, WTF? And wow. We were laughing so bad we were crying. I was with my mom buying flowers at a florist for a New Year's Eve party. The florist was obviously a very lonely woman and wouldn't stop going on about how she isn't doing anything for New Year's and how it's so nice we have friends to visit. To the point where it became really saddening. My mother obviously really felt for her. Every now and again, maybe twice a year, she has a brain fart and accidentally says what she is thinking. That day was one of those rare days. After paying for the flowers, my mom said, "Thanks. Hope you find a friend soon." I look at her in shock, the woman looks at her in shock, and my mom just gasps, apologizes and literally backs out of the store. God, it was so awkward. I used to do security work at parties. One night there was an alert call for a young woman gone missing. I found her with her dress hitched up looking for her underwear in the bushes. I managed to unlock her phone to call her dad, who from his name I recognized as the district attorney. He comes over to pick up his intoxicated daughter. While I was carrying her to the car she was making very sexual remarks about me carrying her, all the while her father is hearing me out like I was responsible for his daughter ending up that way, even suggesting I had raped her. His lecture continued after I put his daughter in the back seat, still making the same remarks while pressing up her body against the car window. When the cops arrived at the scene, she was stark naked, putting her butt out the window. I told the cops my side of the story. As soon as she picked up my name she started moaning it to the point of waking up nearby neighbors. I was brought to the police station for interrogation. Surveillance footage proved my innocence. 5 years later I see this district attorney on a weekly basis at my job. Wife and I went to Europe for our honeymoon. We were in a train station in Amsterdam and I had to use the bathroom. I walked into the toilet stall and saw there was a tampon in the bowl but didn't think anything of it. I did my business and when I tried to flush, it didn't go down. In a panic I flushed again and this only resulted in the water becoming dangerously close to the rim of the bowl. I said F it and started to leave, however right outside the stall was a bathroom attendant. He looked over at me and started yelling at me asking why was I clogging up the toilet. He was blocking me from leaving and all these other people in the bathroom looked in at us. God, it was so embarrassing I wanted to die. I eventually muttered sorry and brushed past him and ran out of the bathroom. I serve in the Air Force and one time I got injured at work and had to go to the hospital. Nothing serious, just dinged my finger super hard, messed up the ligament, my finger was shaped like an N. Anywho, when I get to the hospital I walk in the front door, I'm still in uniform, and some nice older man comes up to me and thanks me for my service. I told him I appreciated his support and then he abruptly asked me if I was married. I told him no and right at that moment he turns to this woman walking by heading for the door. He turns to her and says something along the lines of, "You see this nice man? You should go on a date with him." At first I thought maybe he knew the woman, maybe his daughter or something, but from the shocked look on her face I could easily tell he did not know her. She stopped for a moment and he asked her again and she just went wide-eyed, kind of stuttered for a moment and then beelined it for the door. I really didn't know what to say so I just stood there looking like a guy who just got whacked in the head. The old man then turns back to me and says let's see who else is here and available. At this point I just made some excuse about being late for my appointment and walked away. I don't know if I've ever been so red before, or again in my life. Went out for a car ride once, looking for things to take photos of, and came to this quiet little lake. I get out and walked through this little wooded area where there was an older man, maybe 60s. Things start out okay. He asks me what camera I had, and I told him, and why I'm out, etc. Harmless. Then he asked if I were alone. I said I wasn't. But that didn't stop him from groping himself, his balls, pulling on them, touching them, in front of me and pushing to know more about me, if I were single, etc., and where I was from, but doing so like it was also normal. As you can imagine, this freaked me the absolute hell out. He followed me, and as I tried to get out of the conversation, he kept insisting, looking at me funny, getting a little close for comfort. I told him I had to go, and he insisted on walking me to the car even though he knew I had someone in there waiting for me. It took me a while to push the whole ordeal out of my head. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS, hit the subscribe button and activate the bell for more videos like this. And don't forget to share your own awkward stranger situation in the comments below. Only if you are brave enough.